Dear colleagues and conference participants, my topic is the development of a software system for calculating and visualizing asymmetry in the muscle tendon lengths of the lower extremities during exercise performance in athletes. In the Young Scientist Conference in 2024, I already presented a similar topic. However, at the time it was at the stage of initial research outlines, and now I have completed the stage of athlete data collection and analysis. The problem is that there is asymmetry in the function of the knee joint extensors, especially when athletes perform squats with varying amplitudes, and this can lead to compensatory patterns that alter load distribution. Typically, coaches provide instructions verbally without drawing conclusions based on actual data on the dynamics of athletes' muscles, and for this study, modern marker-based motion capture is conducted for athletes. As a result of the study, a computer program was developed that adaptively identifying squat exercise cycles based on marker-based motion capture data and biomechanical modeling, calculates and visualizes asymmetry in the muscle length in each cycle, computes a coefficient of relative asymmetry, and generates a structured report with all calculations which is provided to the coach. The coach can review the results for a given athlete and adjust the exercise technique. Coach's opinion, video commentary from the coach on the screen. When we move into elite sports, we need and value data in millimeters and centimeters during exercise execution. Training schools differ, they teach differently, and exercise technique suffers. Muscle, joints, and bones suffer. In a way, those who survive in sport became champions. Therefore, such a development as created by Olesia is important and necessary. Next, I will have a slide with this news item that was released in December 2025 about my development, and the person speaking in the video is a coach at our university. He is a master of sport and also participated in my study as a test subject, and the findings were quite interesting for him. He had a tear at the attachment of the rectus femoris muscle, which also became an important finding in the study. As for the equipment of the biomechanics laboratory, it typically consists of high-frequency infrared cameras, 8 units, force plates, at least 2 units, and passive reflective markers that are attached to anatomical landmarks of the human body according to a specific placement protocol. The laboratory can be used not only for the analysis of athletes, but also for rehabilitation and for the analysis of children with cerebral palsy or other musculoskeletal disorders. These are precisely the populations I work with. The study participants were 4 healthy athletes who train daily in the university sports section. Squats are included in their daily training, and 1 male athlete, a master of sport, with a tear at the attachment of the rectus femoris muscle. The slide presents their anthropometric parameters and age range. Inclusion criteria were age under 35 and the daily inclusion of squat exercise and training. The objectives were to conduct a study of athletes using marker-based motion capture, to develop personalized musculoskeletal models for each athlete, and to develop their register computer program with ROS patent that would adaptively identify exercise cycles, calculate key parameters, visualize these data, calculations and graphs, and generate a report for the coach. The first step is, of course, to place passive reflective markers according to a specific placement protocol. There are many such protocols, but in this case, I used one developed and tested at St. Olga's Hospital. This is how reflective markers are placed on the body of a patient or athlete. Then comes the work of a video analysis specialist. We obtain a cloud of points from the markers and motion capture, and specialists must identify all these points and reconstruct lost trajectories. The more cameras we have, the less work is required from the video analysis specialist, and there will be fewer gaps in the trajectories of each point. Otherwise, we must manually reconstruct these missing trajectories. Next is the stage of musculoskeletal modeling in the OpenSim biomechanical modeling software. Muscles are represented in a somewhat simplified form here, but all attachment points are preserved, and this software has long been used even for surgical planning. This is how biomechanical modeling and scaling are performed, that is, fitting the musculoskeletal system onto the skeletal model. In this form, I obtained reports and protocol which were also created with input from the coach regarding what he would like to see in the report. This report is provided to the coach or the athlete. The coach enters the athlete's data, full name, date of birth, the exercise performed, while the date is generated automatically when the report is created. The system identified the following. First, the main task was that when an athlete performed a set of 5 to 6 squats repetitions, the system must automatically determine the end of the previous cycle and the beginning of the next one. In this case, for a healthy athlete, it was relatively easy for the system, for the program I developed, to determine this using the find peaks function while I used Python for coding. It was quite straightforward to identify the patterns of each repetition and segment the data into cycles. However, if we consider an injured individual, in this case, although the injury was chronic, it manifested during the study. At here, at the attachment of the rectus femoris muscle, the program had a much more difficult task because the system could not always correctly determine the end of the previous cycle. It was not possible to segment the cycles based solely on peaks because not every peak indicated muscle relaxation corresponds to the subject being in a resting upright position. Thus, not every peak of maximum elongation corresponds to the athlete being in a vertical position. The system required a more complex approach, therefore additional effort was needed. Ultimately, the system correctly identified the end of the previous cycle and the beginning of the next one using a unique code and a registered computer program that I developed. The program also computates asymmetry between the right and left limbs in each athlete. In each cycle, calculate the amplitude of muscle length change in each cycle, determine the mean values, and computates a coefficient of relative asymmetry across all cycles. This coefficient indicates whether there is a pronounced impairment in exercise execution and whatever technique corrections is required, or whether it is within the norm. When I presented the slide with the healthy athletes, the asymmetry between the right and left rectus femoris muscle was up to 15%, which is considered normal. In contrast, for the athlete with the chronic rectus femoris injury, the asymmetry was 25 and 7%, which exceeds 20%, and it considered a pronounced impairment. This reflects not only incorrect exercise technique, but also the activation of compensatory mechanisms. The system also outputs graphs of movement amplitude in each cycle as well as maximum asymmetry in each cycle. At the end of the document, it includes the performer of the study, full name, signature, and position. This news was published in December 2025 in the national media on a federal television channel in Russia. In conclusion, a computer program was developed and registered that adaptively identified squat exercise cycles using marker-based motion capture and biomechanical modeling data, calculates and visualizes asymmetry in muscles parameters in each cycle, and generates an individualized report for the athlete and coach. As for the next stage, the coach expressed interest in studying muscles dynamics during arm wrestling. For my research, I see expansion in the number of participants, inclusion of female participants, and the implementation of this program in the workflow of our biomechanics laboratory at the Federal Scientific and Educational Center named after Albrecht. Thank you.